Module 17. Under this module, we will cover pay items that utilize unit, such as supplemental watering, plants or seedlings. We will also cover unit diameter, which is a tree removal unit. Let's cover unit for supplemental watering. This is covered on Article 252 of the spec book. There's also an IDR example on F68, and we'll be covering that in just a minute. But basically, a unit for watering is defined as 1,000 gallons. Accuracy of measurement is covered on B4 of the dot guide. It's to the nearest 0.1 unit daily. And then when you final your quantities, you'll go to the nearest whole unit. Required documentation. For water, you need to obtain your water from a potable water source. And then from there, if you have a utility meter, you could use those tickets from the utility. Or you could treat it like a tonnage item and require them to weigh trucks as they deliver them, and then the calculations. Also on B4 is how to do calculations converting pounds to gallons, which you divide your weight by 8.328 pounds to convert it to gallons. And their method is, rather than weighing individual trucks and getting weights, you could also count trucks and determine the number of gallons or units in that truck from some weight information. That would be a measurement of convenience. Measured up the first one, calculate it, show those calculations on the IDR, and then from then on you could count fully loaded trucks. Likewise, if you happen to have manufacturer information on the capacity of the truck tank, that can be used. The contractor may have that information, or you may be able to obtain that from a reliable website. Units for plants is defined as 100 plants or seedlings. This is covered under Article 253. We also have an IDR we'll cover here in a minute on F69 of the dot guide. Perennial plants are measured to the nearest 500ths on a daily basis, and seedlings to the nearest 10th. And then when you final out your quantities, you will use the nearest full unit. You will record the station where the plant or seedlings are placed, the location, any calculations you might have done. As far as material inspection, you're going to have a letter of certification from the nursery, and then you're going to have to do a visual, RE visual, to make sure the plants are alive. And quite often it's difficult to know what different plants and seedlings are because they're basically bare and sticks. You may have to take a picture, contact a landscaping person to make sure you have the correct materials to install. Okay, let's go to the documentation guide, page F68. Here we see an example of an IDR on supplemental watering. Of course, we have the typical heading information, who worked on various aspects of this IDR, and we're doing supplemental watering. We got the location recorded. Evidence and material inspection for water is that it must come from a potable water source, in this case the Danville Municipal Water Supply. And this is going to be a final field measurement, so we can check that box and our item number. Now the inspector noted that here that the Article 252.08, which is on sod watering, and basically repeated the specification for that watering, which is one initial watering of 5 gallons done within 2 hours of placement, and then 15 additional waterings at 3 gallons per square yard were applied. So that's incidental to the sod specification. Conditions were such that the sod would not have been completely established here because it's hot or very dry, lack of rain. So the determination was made to continue watering, and thus we have supplemental watering starting on this particular day. The rate is the same as the additional waterings of the incidental specification at 3 gallons per square yard. The area is noted, so you could do a yield if you wish. The truck plate should be noted here because you may have a contractor that has different watering trucks, perhaps. You want to make sure that you know which plate matches up with what quantity on that truck. In this case, it's known that 3,500 gallons per load, either from manufacturer's information or from using weights and tears of fully loaded trucks to determine that. So that would be attached to the first IDR, how many gallons per load you're using. And it's a matter of simply counting the loads used and doing a very simple calculation, coming up the gallons, converting it to units, and then that's what we put in our quantity. Let's go to page F69 of your documentation guide, where we see we have a IDR for seedlings. Your normal header information, in this case your item code 253 under seedlings, it's your pay item, the location of where these seedlings were installed. We'll cover how we calculate the quantities. And then your evidence and material inspection. In this case, you have a letter of certification, and then you're going to perform an RE visual. You want to make sure the plants are seemingly viable and hopefully match what the pay item requirement is as far as the type of plants. You may need to contact the landscaping person in the district to confirm that you indeed do have the correct types of plants. Quite often they look like sticks with roots and do not lend themselves to easy identifications. In this case, the seedlings were in bunches of 30 plants, and you were provided 87 bunches. So count the bunches real quick. And maybe 2 or 3 check to make sure you do have 30 plants per bunch. So a very simple calculation to convert number of plants to units. Note that per specification, you pay 90% upon installing the plant. So we had 26.1 units installed, but 90% of that is 23.5, and that's what's included in our quantity. This is per article 253.17, and the remaining 10% will be paid upon the establishment period being successful. And the other alternative is that the contractor provides a performance bond, whereas upon providing that bond, you can give them full pay for these units. Let's cover unit diameter. This is for tree removal under Article 201. We'll cover documentation page F70 in your guide a little bit later in this section. The accuracy of measurement for quantity is to the nearest unit diameter. Now, the unit diameter is the only item that requires the documentation of what type of measurement device has been used. There is such a thing called tree tape. A tree tape is a tape that has pi built in to the hash marks on the tape. So it's a very special tape. If you do not have one of these, you're going to use a regular tape to determine the diameter of the tree. And in that case, you're going to measure the circumference of the tree and divide it by pi. And the department defines pi as 3.1416. So include your calculations, include documentation, whether you're using a normal tape or a tree tape. That must be on your IDR, what type of tape that you have used. The department has a specific method to measure unit diameter on trees. What we're going to do is come 4.5 feet off the natural line, grade line, up the tree, and that's where we're going to take our diameter measurement. So 4.5 feet above the highest ground line. Then we're going to break our diameters into two groupings, 6 to 15 unit diameters, and then over 15 unit diameters. Anything below 6 is considered clearing, and there may be many trees on your project that are just under that 6 inches. They are not considered in the unit diameters of tree removal. Only 6 to 15 and over 15 are considered. Now the previous example was for a single stem tree. Here we have a multiple stem tree. Again, you're going to come 4.5 feet off the ground, the highest point, and determine where that is, and then measure the diameter of the different branches. Anything below 6 will not be considered as far as tree removal quantity in unit diameters. In this case, we got one leg here that is 8 inches, the other is 5. That means we have 8 unit diameters in the 6 to 15 group. The 5-inch would be considered clearing. Quite often you run into conditions where erosion have taken place in the past, and the tree may be like in the bank situation as this. In this case, you measure again from the highest ground level up your 4.5 feet. You do not measure from down here in the roots. If you did, you're actually adding quite a bit of diameter to the quantity here. So per specification, highest ground level up 4.5 feet, and then measure your diameter. What if you run into a stump? The main tree has been removed at some time in the past, so there's a stump. Well, if the stump is shorter than 4.5 feet, you just go to the highest point, and that's where you measure your diameter and record that. So in this case, you measured 16 inches, and that's what you're going to put in the over 15, your 16 units. For those interested in IDOT history, over time there's been a variety of specifications on how far to measure up. Many years ago it was initially 2 feet, and in the case of this tree example, that would have been 24-inch diameters. Then at some point in time it was made 4 feet, which would have gotten you 18. And then more recently, the current specification is 4.5 feet. So you have a 10 and a 5. The 5 is under the 6, only record the 10. So that's what you would pay for this particular tree removal, is a 10. Here we have a high production mechanized tree cutting unit. The contractor may utilize this type of equipment or a bulldozer and simply bulldoze out trees, roots and all, or depending on the type and variety of trees, they actually may be logged followed by bulldozing out the stumps. Depth of stump removal depends upon where the stump is located. If it's at the edge of the embankment, normal ground line, it'd be a minimum of 12 inches. If it's within the embankment, it can be sheared off, cut off at the ground line. Let's go to the documentation guide on page F70. Here we see an example of a field book on tree removal. See the location. It would be ideal if this location information also included left or right of the centerline station, a number of feet where that tree was located. Then we have the circumference of the tree measured. And as the information gathered out in the field, just station and circumference measurement. And it was taken back to the office and then calculated out, dividing by pi to get the unit diameter. And then once the unit diameter, as an example here, 613.65, was determined, it was placed in the proper pay item column so it could be added up for the total unit diameters for 6 to 15 and over 15. And then as these were removed, it was noted what date they were removed, making them eligible for payment. Here we have summarized from perhaps some additional pages in the back, some subcontractor removal work. Again, there should be a table with station, location, measurements, what type of tape was used, whether it was a normal tape or a tree tape. So that's documented of what type of tape was used. And then this is summarized for payment here.